Imagine you're standing at the shore of a great body of water. It could be a lake, or a river, or the sea. The water stretches out towards the horizon, sparkling like diamonds where sunlight refracts off its surface. And then something catches your eye. A single plastic bottle bobbing its way across the waves. Plastic pollution is a problem that the vast majority of us are familiar with. Bottle caps lodged like little white stones in the dirt, plastic wrap in shopping bags rolling around like tumbleweeds on windy days, old straws and coffee lids that no one ever bothered to throw out. We see plastic litter scattered about everywhere in our day-to-day lives. It's a bit surprising, considering how often we're told how plastic pollution impacts our environment. In 2015, Dr. Christine Figner captured this heartbreaking footage of an injured sea turtle. Dr. Figner and her team were horrified when what they thought was a parasitic worm turned out to be a disposable straw embedded in the turtle's nose. The video quickly went viral, and its viewers joined the crowd of voices protesting plastic waste. In response to the growing public outcry, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a plan to phase out all forms of single-use plastic by 2021. However, in the wake of COVID-19, this plan may not be so easy to enact. Despite its negative impact on our environment, plastic remains one of our best defenses against the spread of COVID-19. Not only in the form of personal protective equipment, but as sanitary packaging, all for much of the same reasons that plastic came into widespread use in the first place. Plastic is versatile. It can be rigid or flexible as needed. It's easy to sanitize, and it can be molded into most any shape you can imagine. It's a durable, inexpensive material that supports many different sectors of our daily lives, from agriculture to household products to hospital equipment and other medical uses. But see, in ecology, that's the problem. It's durable. Plastic is one of the longest-lived materials that man has ever made. It is believed that nearly all of the plastic ever produced on our planet still exists in one form or another. That is an estimated 8.3 billion tons of plastic. According to a 2006 Greenpeace report, around 10% of that plastic ends up in our oceans, where it wreaks havoc on the ecosystem. When dealing with the problem of plastic pollution, you must consider the type of plastic you are dealing with. Not only the chemical makeup, some of which are more innately toxic than others, but also the size and rigidity of the items themselves. Plastic with different properties tends to cause different ecological problems. The easiest way to categorize these plastics is simply by their visible physical traits: the rigid plastics, the flexible plastics, and microplastics. Let's start with the rigid plastics. Plastic furniture, bottles, clamshell containers, and other such items fit in this category, and are the most infamous of the types of oceanic waste. But interestingly, they are often the least threatening kinds of plastic. Even so, the least threatening plastic pollution is still very ecologically dangerous. To start with, these types of plastics tend to be more innately toxic. PVC, although most well known in the form of PVC pipes, also appears in such things as building materials, medical supplies, and children's school supplies. PVC contains a type of toxic chemical called phthalates, which function as a softener, allowing the plastic to be molded into shape. In high enough doses, phthalates have been known to cause damage to the liver, kidneys, lungs, and reproductive system, and prenatal exposure is often associated with difficulty in neurodevelopment. Some of them are even carcinogenic. When PVC plastic ends up in rivers, lakes, and oceans, these compounds leach into the water, and eventually make their way back to us. These large plastics are also prone to absorbing and concentrating heavy metals in the water around them. Cadmium, lead, and other toxic metals are often used in the production of plastics, and when they leach into the water table, they will often attach themselves to any plastic they encounter in a process referred to as sorbing. The plastic then carries the metal, keeping it active in the water column. Furthermore, metals aren't the only thing that plastic carries. Plastic can also serve as a vessel and breeding ground for many species of bacteria and algae, including toxic ones. Red tide, a phenomenon resulting from large blooms of such algae, can decimate local wildlife populations, be it through direct consumption of contaminated water or by secondary exposure through bioaccumulation. Imagine it. A single piece of marine plastic contaminated with a species of red tide algae carries the virgin bloom to new waters, where an upswelling of nutrients from the seafloor allows the algae to reproduce in drastic numbers. This new red tide would kill off local fish, whose corpses would wash up on the beach and be gorged upon by seabirds and land-bound scavengers, which would die themselves soon after. Flexible plastics usually take the form of disposable bags, rubber tubing, plastic sheets, and packaging, but by far the poster child of oceanic pollution is ghost gear. Making up about 70% of macroplastic waste and about 20% of all marine debris, these tangled lines, hooks, and nets were disconnected from the fishing vessels they once belonged to and transformed by buoyancy into mile-long floating veils of death. Out of all of the plastic debris floating around in the ocean, ghost gear is by far the most deadly to marine life. After all, it was specifically designed to capture and kill them. The International Whaling Commission estimates that over 300,000 whales and dolphins die annually in this way, dragged down by the weight of lines and nets until they cannot reach the surface to breathe. Fish caught in these nets may not drown, but will often starve to death caught in these self-baiting traps. And while not as stark in terms of sheer scale, many other forms of entanglement are perhaps even more frightening, scaled down to individuals. Imagine a set of plastic rings, the kind used to package a six-pack of beer or soda cans. Imagine these plastic rings end up on a beach, and a young sea turtle crawls through them on its way to the ocean. The ring gets stuck on the turtle's shell. What do you think is going to happen as that baby turtle grows? The answer looks like this. As the turtle increases in size, the plastic ring does not. Over time, the ring gets tighter and tighter, cinching the animal's body to the point that its skeletal structure is deformed, possibly leading to organ damage as well. Around limbs, this effect can lead to amputation, as the tight bindings cut off blood circulation, leading to tissue death. Around an animal's neck, strangulation often occurs. Marine mammals can also be entangled around their mouths, making it difficult or even impossible for them to eat. Most aquatic animals do not have the dexterity required to shake off entangling plastic before it gets too tight, which means that a single encounter with entangling plastic can often mean inevitable death days, weeks, or even months down the line. Moving on to the last of our three categories, we have the microplastics. Most plastic is photodegradable, which means that extended exposure to sunlight causes them to degrade. This is especially true in the rough conditions in the ocean. However, these plastics don't break down. They break up, becoming smaller and smaller chunks until they can no longer be seen by the naked eye, but retaining all of the toxic properties of their larger selves. And in doing so, they become the most dangerous kind of plastic of all. How so? They've become small enough to consume. Depending on how small they are and what kind of plastic they come from, microplastics can affect animals that eat them in many different ways. Some don't even have to be actual microplastics, just small enough for the animal in question to swallow. Whales, seabirds, and turtles are some of the most vulnerable. Mistaken for food, the plastic chunks build up in the animal's stomach until they die, be it from toxicity or starvation. Larger, stiffer plastics may have sharp edges that lacerate an animal's insides, causing them immense pain before they die of internal bleeding or complications. Microscopic plastic contaminants can even be passed to other animals, as the particles accumulate in the flesh and organs of the animals that consume them, ingested along with the meat when they, in turn, are eaten. Humankind isn't left out either. You probably wouldn't believe it if someone told you that you consume a credit card's worth of plastic every week, but according to a recent study by the World Wildlife Fund, you likely do exactly that. Plastic absorbed at the bottom of the food chain is passed all the way up to the top, and that is where we source a large amount of our fish. Furthermore, there's the greatest source of plastic we consume, our water supply. Microplastics can get into our drinking water in a number of ways, leaching off of water bottles or plastic cups, or in the case of tap water, it comes from the fibers of our clothing, which aren't filtered out like other contaminants in our wash water before being returned to the general water supply. So how on earth do we fix it, you may ask? Because the truth is that while it may sometimes seem futile, there are ways that you can make a difference. Plastic waste is a human-made problem, and so requires a human-made solution. And right now, we are closer to that solution than we have ever been before. The first step is to stem the flow of new plastic reaching our oceans. You all know about the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. But most people only really focus on recycling. Reducing your plastic use is the #1 first step to reducing plastic waste. When you shop, avoid products with extra plastic packaging. Use a fabric mask. Avoid buying bottled water. If you can, wear clothing made from organic fibers so that they won't shed plastic filaments in the wash. Even the smallest choices on your part can reduce the amount of plastic coming into your household, and thus the amount leaving it. Next up, reusing. Repurpose old jugs or tubs into storage containers. Parents, give your kids the first pick of old plastic to use as crafting supplies. Find a way to breathe value back into your plastic junk. The only limit is your imagination. Finally, recycling. Most of you already have this down pat, so here are a few tips. Some kinds of plastic are recyclable, but others are not. Oftentimes, certain types of plastic that could be recycled are skipped over, as recycling them would be more expensive to the producer than simply buying more plastic. You can determine how recyclable a plastic product is before you buy it by looking at the number written inside of the recycling symbol. Items labeled with the numbers 1 and 2 are easy to recycle, while items labeled 3 through 7 are often difficult and may not be accepted in recycling programs. But of course, there is more that you can do than just managing your own household. Most plastic waste comes from corporations rather than individuals, and needs a larger united effort to clean it up. Here's where researchers and charities could use your help. Organizations such as 4Ocean, the Ocean Cleanup, the Ocean Conservancy, and many others work tirelessly to help undo the damage that plastic waste does to our environment. Any one of them would be grateful for your support. Furthermore, the scientific community is behind us too. A bacteria called Ideanella sakaensis was first identified in 2016 by researchers from Kyoto University of Technology and has since been proven to increase the rate of plastic degradation. In other words, it can digest plastic. Many researchers have been experimenting with the enzyme it uses to do so, called hydrolase or PETase, in order to maximize this effect. Others are working on creating biodegradable, biosourced plastics, such as Mr. Michiro Komatsu, the president of a professional engineers consulting firm in Iwakai City in Japan. He and his team use molding technology to produce items made from polylactic acid, which once set behaves much like plastic, but degrades quickly in seawater. This eco-friendly plastic alternative is already gaining attention in Europe and Asia, but unfortunately it has not yet reached investors here in North America. You can help change this by signing the petition linked in the description. Oceanic plastic pollution may seem too large a problem for any one person to make an impact, but this could not be further from the truth. It is up to all of us to be the change we want to see in the world, and there is no better time than now to take that first step.